Welcome to Fail2ban Mastery. Before we touch a single config file, we need to get one thing straight. Fail2ban is not a firewall, it's not antivirus, and it's certainly not magic. It's a small Python daemon that reads your log files, counts how often each IP misbehaves, and tells your firewall to drop the bad ones. That's the whole system, and over this lesson, we'll unpack it through 4 pieces: the definition, the 4 parts, what it isn't, and the ban lifecycle. So, if you only remember one sentence from this entire course, make it this one. Fail2ban watches log files, counts how often each IP misbehaves, and tells the firewall to ban the offenders for a configurable amount of time. Notice what's missing. No packet inspection, no traffic analysis, no machine learning, no signatures, no agents on your remote boxes. It's a log scanner with a ban hammer. Everything else we'll cover is just configuration wrapped around those 2 ideas. Let's break that ban hammer down into its actual moving parts. There are 4 stages, and they always run in this order. First, watch. Fail2ban tails a log file, just like you'd run tail f on auth.log. Second, match. Every new line gets tested against a regex, and if it looks like a failed login, the source IP gets extracted. Third, count. That IP's offense counter ticks up. Inside a sliding time window we'll later call find time. And fourth, ban. Once the counter crosses the threshold, an action fires, usually an iptables rule that drops the offender. Watch, match, count, ban. Burn that sequence in. Everything else in this series is just details hanging off these 4 boxes. Now let's map those 4 stages onto what actually lands on disk when you apt install the package. You get 4 things: the daemon itself, Fail2ban server, a Python process system keeps alive, doing all the watching and counting in memory. The configuration, plain ini files under etc. fail2ban, where jail.local is the one you'll actually edit. The filters, a library of per-service regexes in filter.d, over 50 shipped by default, 1 for SSD, 1 for postfix, and so on. And the actions in action.d, small shell scripts that do the real banning, usually by shelling out to iptables. Daemon, config, filters, actions, that's the whole install. Before we go deeper, it's worth clearing up what Fail2ban isn't, because beginners constantly mix it up with 3 neighboring tools. A firewall works at layers 3 and 4. It decides yes or no on packets based on IP and port. A WF lives up at layer 7 and reads HTTP bodies looking for attack patterns. An IDS or IPS does deep packet inspection across the stack, hunting for known signatures. Fail2ban does none of that. It reads logs and then asks the firewall to do the actual banning. These tools complement each other. A serious server runs all of them, and Fail2ban is just the cheapest, easiest one to bolt on. So let's watch that pipeline actually run. Over 12 seconds, the same IP fails password attempts for root, admin, Ubuntu, Git, and Postgres. Clearly someone walking a username list. Fail2ban's filter matches each line and bumps a counter. On the 5th strike, it hits max retry, fires the action, and iptables drops in a reject rule for that source. 10 minutes later, the ban time expires, the rule gets removed, and the IP is free to try again. That's the entire tool, end to end. Now that you've seen the pipeline run, you need to know where it lives on disk. Fail2ban scatters itself across 6 paths, and these are the only ones worth memorizing. 2 you never touch, jail.conf and the SysAdmin database. 1 you edit constantly, jail.local, your override file. The filter and action directories you only visit when writing custom rules, and fail2ban.log is where you go when something breaks. Golden rule. Jail.conf gets clobbered on every package upgrade, so all your changes belong in jail.local. With the file layout in your head, let's zoom back into the runtime behavior. Specifically, what happens to an IP from the moment it shows up in a log. A ban isn't a binary flip. It's a state machine with 5 stops. Observed is the first match, counter at 1. Counted is the climb. More hits arrive inside the find time window, but still under threshold. Banned is the moment the counter crosses max retry and the firewall rule gets installed. Enforced is the waiting period while packets get dropped. And expired is when ban time runs out, the rule comes off, and the IP gets a clean slate. 2 timers, 1 threshold, 5 states, that's the whole life cycle. Now that you understand the life cycle, you need a way to actually poke at it, and that's Fail2ban Client. The reference page lists over 30 subcommands, but in practice your daily vocabulary is 6. Ping to confirm the demon's alive. Status, with or without a jail name, to see what's running and who's currently banned. Set banip and unbanip for manual intervention. And yes, you will lock yourself out at some point. And reload to pick up config edits without restarting the service. Master these 6 and you've covered 90% of real operational work. Before we wrap up, let's clear 3 myths that even experienced admins still repeat. First, Fail2ban doesn't prevent brute force attacks. The first few attempts always land. It's a cleanup tool, not a shield, so pair it with strong passwords and key-only SSH. Second, 0 bans isn't a sign of safety. It's a sign your filter is broken or watching the wrong log. A public server will have bans daily. And third, bans aren't permanent. The default is 10 minutes, which barely inconveniences anyone. Bump ban time up and add the recidiv jail to actually punish repeat offenders. With the myths out of the way, here's your self-check before Lesson 2. 5 questions. Answer each one out loud without peeking. What does Fail2ban actually do? What are its 4 moving parts? How does it differ from a firewall? Walk the ban lifecycle from observed to expired. And name 3 client commands you'd reach for. If any of those feel shaky, scroll back now. The next lesson assumes all 5 are solid. And that's Lesson 1 in the bag. 1 sentence definition, 4 moving parts, full life cycle, and the myths cleared out of the way. The mental model is the hard part. Everything from here is just wiring it up. In Lesson 2, we actually install the thing. Apt install Fail2ban. Look at what the default SSHD jail is already doing for you, and then we trigger your very first ban on yourself and walk back out of it. See you there.